Today we welcome back Kathi Macias.
She was very active in the abolitionist movement, that she was the first woman to speak to the U.S. Congress.
Pass it on, share the gospel clear and strong. Stand for, claim your heritage of truth.
Welcome to Heritage of Truth. Today we welcome back Kathi Macias. Welcome, Kathi.
Thank you so much. I always enjoy being here.
We always enjoy having you. Kathi has a new quilt series book out called The Singing Quilt. And one of the reasons I especially wanted to interview her on this is because you talk about one of my heroines in here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this book?
Fanny Crosby has always been one of my heroines too. Just so admired her, and like with all three of the quilt books, I thought I knew about the historical woman whose story I wove into each one, but when I started digging into them and really researching, I was just so amazed at all the additional information I found. And in the case of Fanny Crosby, I knew she was blind, and I knew she wrote hymns, and I think that's pretty much what I knew about her, and she wrote a lot of hymns. And I always thought that in itself was amazing. But I also found out she was very active in the abolitionist movement, that she was the first woman to speak to the U.S. Congress.
Wow.
And here's this blind woman, and there she was, and that for a while she lived on her own, that she married, and her husband also was blind. They had one child who died, and they never had another one. But she did all these things, and I think what sealed it for me was when I came across a statement where someone had asked her, do you ever just ask God, why don't you heal me? Why don't you give me back my sight? And she said, no, I don't, because she said, I have a very nice life the way it is, and this way, when I get to heaven, the very first face I'm going to see is my Savior. So, I mean, if ever I thought she was a heroine before that, that really sealed it. So that's the background of the story. That's certainly not the contemporary part of it.
Right. What is the contemporary story?
Well, each of the three quilt stories has a historical woman from America in the background. And then the main story is a contemporary one that deals with a particular issue. The first one with interracial relationships, the second one with the pro-life issue, and this one...
And what's the title of that one?
The second one is called The Doctor's Christmas Quilt.
Okay.
And this one, The Singing Quilt, is about a young woman named Julissa Montoya. A very lovely young woman, but very insecure. Her parents were killed in a car accident when she was just a young girl, and she was taken in by an uncle grudgingly. He did not want to do it. There was just no one else to do it. And he never let her forget that, and he hammered that at her all the time. He didn't physically abuse her, but he just continually verbally abused her and told her how stupid she was and what a drain she was on everything and what a burden. And she began to feel so worthless, and she developed a terrible problem with stuttering. And so when she came to the point of believing that she had this desire, this dream that maybe God wanted her to minister to other inner city children where she lived, she was so intimidated by who she was and her own inabilities that she thought it was impossible. But it's when she meets a woman, an older woman who becomes sort of an adoptive grandmother to her at church, who has this quilt depicting the life of Fanny Crosby, and she begins to share the story with Julissa to help her learn about overcoming her disabilities.
Great. Well, you have another book that has been out for a while.
Yes.
And you actually give an award every year.
Yes, I do.
Based on this book. But it's called Beyond Me, Living a You-First Life in a Me-First World. And I'd never gotten to interview you on this book, so I wanted you to tell us about this one, too.
That, I think, if I had to say I have a flagship ministry book, it would be this one. It's something that was written out of my heart over many years. And something that sort of encapsulates what God has taught me through the many years I've walked with Him, and the way He's changed me and opened my eyes to so many things. And I think I can best explain it that when my father died, which was about 15 years ago, and he didn't become a believer till the very end of his life, the last few days, but Mom and my brothers and me, we were all believers by that time, even though we weren't when we were young. Mom came to live with us. And I was glad. I loved my mom. But it's a stressful thing to suddenly have this other person in your home, and she became less and less able to do things on her own. I had to drive her everywhere. And once she fell and broke her hip, it got really bad. I was doing everything for her.
Yes.
And I caught myself grumbling, just grumbling. And it hadn't been too long before that, which was at the beginning of the year. This is something I do every year when a year ends and a new one's coming. I spend a little extra time in prayer just saying, Lord, give me some clear direction for this next year. Maybe just a word or something like that, And the strangest thing, he said, somebody has to set up the chairs. And you're thinking, oh, that's just my imagination. I didn't hear that. That doesn't make sense. But I'd walked with the Lord long enough to know that when I hear those words in my heart, maybe they mean something. So I began to pay attention to that. And I was going through a period in ministry and writing where things seemed to be drying up. I had been, before that, just everything was exploding, everything was going well, and then things kind of got slow. And I thought, okay, maybe the Lord wants me to just back off and just serve other people in ministry for a while. And so that's what I began to do. Rather than being the one up there speaking on the stage, I was the one setting up the chair, so to speak, and to serve them. And so I thought I had that figured out. And then with Mom having her problems, and I mean, you're rushing, you're busy all the time, and she needed one more thing, and I heard myself grumbling again. And I said, Lord, I'm just so busy, I'm just so tired, what am I going to do? And once again, I heard those words, somebody has to set up the chairs. And it just hit me, this isn't just about serving people in big ministries. This is about serving people every day, right there in our own home, in our own lives. And sometimes that's a lot harder.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're interfacing with them every day, interacting with them. But I realized that's what God had called me to do for a season, to set up chairs for my mom, so to speak, as she did for me when I was little. And I was very sickly as a child. She took care of me for many years. And it changed my perspective. Suddenly I could begin to look at things beyond myself. And I thought, that's really what life is about. And you look around in the world, and it is a me first mentality. It's all about me, and it gets more so like that all the time. I remember taking my granddaughter when she was little one time to the store, and she ran to when I say little, she was a preteen, not teeny, and she ran straight to the cosmetic counter where they had a little section for teens and preteens, and she said, look, Grandma, they've got some perfume just for me, and it was called It's About Me. And it kind of hit me. I thought, we're just inundated, kids especially, but all of us inundated. It's about you. Go grab what you can get, and I thought, how opposite of what God calls us to. So all of that kind of came together to become beyond me, living a you first life in a me first world, because that's what's going to draw people's attention. Not when we live just like them, or even if we preach all day and hit them with the Bible, but when they're living in a me first world, and they deep down inside they know it doesn't work, and they look around and they see other people living a you first life, because we're walking in the footsteps of Jesus, who was the perfect you first model. Right. They may not all agree with us or follow us, but at least they'll recognize something different and hopefully come and ask us about it.
And then we can point them to Jesus.
Absolutely.
That's right. So do you have anything else in the works?
I do. I have a new Christmas book releasing. Every year I'll be doing a Christmas novel. This has become kind of a fun thing to look forward to doing, and my publisher, New Hope, has agreed, yes, just plan on writing our Christmas novel every year. 2014, it's called A Christmas Gift, and it's about a woman in her mid-40s who's just lost her husband, and her life is really kind of in a turmoil, and she's having a hard time finding any meaning in anything she's doing. She's a school teacher, she loves her job, but even that seems kind of flat, and she has the opportunity to go down into southern Mexico, Chiapas State, which is an area where there's a lot of Mayan influence and a lot of superstition, and Christians are not welcome. But there's a compound where she'll be going to teach, where they also have a church. But to make a long story short, and I won't wrap it all up, she gets kidnapped.
Oh.
So it definitely is going to change her life, and hopefully the readers too.
That's going to be fun.
Yes.
Interesting. Well, you also have a heart for the persecuted church. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
I really do. These are my heroes. You know, I've long been a follower of Voice of the Martyrs and Open Doors and China Aid and all of those wonderful ministries that reach out to these people. Because of what I do, I have the opportunity to meet a lot of people in Christian media, whether writers, singers, TV, or whatever it may be, and lovely people. But then I come away and I think about who my real heroes are. And it's these people who have nothing. And they suffer beyond our imaginings for their faith. Just to say they're a believer puts their very life in danger, the lives of their families. They're running for their lives. I recently finished reading a book from the Voice of the Martyrs called The Generations, and it's about the handful of Christians, brave, incredible Christians in North Korea, trying to keep their faith and pass it on to their next generation so it won't die out there under the most unimaginable circumstances. Very, very hard. And I even wrote a series called the Extreme Devotion series of 4 books. They're fiction, but they're all based in truth about people in other countries who do really pay a high price, and more than any of us imagine, for their faith. And I believe this isn't really a depressing thing. A lot of people say, I don't want to read something like that. This sounds terrible. But I believe it's really inspiring. It helps us realize, that God is greater. He is right there in the midst of it. And they're so close to Him. They're so dependent upon Him. They know He's holding them in His nail-scarred hands. And when I pray for them, I pray that God will just let His presence, the joy of His presence, be their strength every moment. Because I know in just little things, I have no strength apart from God. I had a friend one time that used to say, the Antichrist is on the horizon and I can fall over a Twinkie. I don't have any strength to stand on my own. And that's absolutely true. It's all about depending on Him in the big things or the little things. And those people just so inspire me because they're so close, walking so closely to Him with very little education, very little opportunity to interface with other believers and worship and pray with them, but totally committed and devoted to their Savior.
Well, historically, hasn't the persecuted church always been stronger than the church that's at ease?
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I really believe God allows that to purify the church. Because when you stop and think about it, the early church was always persecuted, and they were strong. But when the church became, Constantine probably thought he was doing a good thing by making Christianity the official religion. But what it then did was invite all sorts of pagans into the church and people who went just to see and be seen. And they dressed up and they cared about all these things that didn't really matter. And it tainted the church. It truly did. And so there comes times throughout history and now, of course, too, where that persecution has to come. Because if you're not truly a believer, if you are there for any of the wrong reasons, when persecution comes, you're leaving. That's all there is to it. I'm gone. Why would I stay? And so, yes, I do believe God allows that to purify His church.
I really appreciate you coming. Why don't you tell people how they can find you online, where they can get your books and find out about all the others that you've written? How many are there now?
47.
47 books. Wow.
Well, they can always find them in bookstores, and they can find them in all the online venues, but I love it if they come to my website, which is Kathi, Kathi, Macias, Macias.com, or they can just go to boldfiction.com. And if they do that, they can email me, contact me. I'll answer them. They can sign up for my monthly devotional. They can.
Oh, and I get that devotional, and it's wonderful.
That's right, you do.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. And it goes out in English and Spanish. And they can see videos that go with the different books. There's just a lot of things they can interact with and do there. So I would really love it if they keep there.
That would be great. Well, thank you so much for coming again. Really appreciate you, Kathi.
Thank you for having me.